But Daniel Block, you're joining us from New York. In November, we'll have the big presidential elections. Do you get any takeaways from what has happened in Britain? You've got an economy which is on the up, and despite that, the numbers are showing Biden trailing Trump. Is this a reflection of the debate that's going on over Biden's age? There's talk that he might even step down after that first debate and give way possibly to Kamala Harris or another candidate. But are there takeaways that sitting governments are on notice at the moment across the world, or is the US very different compared to what happened in the United Kingdom?
There are obviously a lot of differences between what's happening in the United Kingdom and what's happening in the United States. As you noted, our economy is quite a bit stronger than it is in the UK. At the same time, one thing that's quite consistent is inflation. Inflation has been high in the United States. It's been coming down, but there's still a sense across the country that prices have gone up.
Try and come back to you and get your audio fixed, Daniel, as early as possible. We are getting a bit of a hum sound. I'll come back to you in a moment. But Farooq Dhondi, we are listing out the various factors that have resulted in a landslide. You gave us an overarching picture. It almost seemed as if the Tories didn't do anything right. But do you get a sense across the world as we see pictures of Joe Biden and the Trump versus Biden battle that's upon us? What we saw in India, where the Prime Minister didn't get the kind of overwhelming majority, was expecting that whoever is in power at the moment is on notice because people are getting impatient on issues like inflation, on issues like unemployment. These are the two global problems that the world is facing. Farooq, can you hear me?
Sorry. You're asking me, Mr. Biden is hanging on by his, shoestring, I suppose, because the blunders that he made when speaking, he really doesn't seem quite fit for office. But the Democrats and his supporters and Jill Biden don't want him to resign, and he's facing great pressure to try and stay exactly where he is. Not that I see that the Democrats, with the Vice President, Kamala Harris, Kamala is not terribly popular. She hasn't been heard of since she became Vice President, and she will definitely replace Biden if he resigns. There are other contenders in the field, but the other contenders have to overcome Kamala's natural.
I'm just stopping you for a moment, Farooq, because Daniel Block joins us again. Let's get that American perspective from him. Daniel, we've been talking about the United Kingdom. What are the parallels you see with the US and what's different?
The biggest parallels are inflation and this general sense that's going around the world that incumbents are unpopular. Those are the two biggest parallels. People feel like prices have gone up, that they can afford less than they could even a few years ago, and that's made the incumbent government quite unpopular. But there are many differences. So one thing that's dragging down the approval of the Democratic Party, and really in particular Joe Biden, is Joe Biden himself. He's clearly quite old. The debate did him no favors because it exposed, I think, some of his limits. Interestingly, one thing we see is that the Democratic Party as a whole appears to be running ahead of Joe Biden. So if you look at competitive Senate races, the Democratic nominees there are doing better than Joe Biden is himself. So he, in some ways, may be dragging down the ticket. And obviously, the most obvious difference being, as you mentioned before, the economy in the United States is stronger than it is in the United Kingdom. And yet that may not be enough to overcome issues of inflation and just general unpopularity of incumbent governments.
Can I come though, Navteej Sarna, and maybe Farooq, you can also step into this, the belief that there is this cultural factor as well at play, that Trump is talking about America first. You've had the likes of the Reform Party in Britain talking about putting Britain's interests first above all else. And there is the sense that while the economy is one issue, there's also the issue of how do we define nationalism and our best interests. Do you believe that's a factor, Navteej Sarna, when you look at what's happened in Britain, the Reform Party showing signs of being on the rise?
Yes, Rajdeep, I'm glad you've touched this point, because I was hesitating to agree with your generalization that it is only the incumbent government factor that is a problem. There are several other issues. For instance, in the United States, there is a huge Trumpian bloc, which is this almost populist right, the kind of thing that's reflected in Nigel Farage's Reform Party and relative success in this election. At the same time, there is a rise in nationalism, hyper-nationalism. There is a rise in xenophobia in parts of Europe in terms of migrants and immigration.
We're seeing it in France, issue. If I may say so. We're seeing it in France, the possibility that Marine Le Pen may be in the fight.
Yeah. So yes, there is, for instance, there you don't see the economic issues so much. What you're seeing is an ideological divide. There is an ideological divide coming right across Europe. If you see the European Parliament elections as well, there are 6 countries in Europe out of the 27 of the EU which are ruled by far-right parties. And that is the kind of thing that Macron is trying to stem with this gamble. And, so there are ideological things. The economy, the inflation, the immigration issue, that has been more to the fore in the UK. In the United States, I think it's a far deeper divide. It's a cultural divide. It's a personality issue. And it is the system which has thrown up people like only Trump and Biden. It's a terrible choice. Today, 70% of registered voters in the US do not want Biden. 50% of the registered voters don't want Trump. But that's what they're saddled with. So, there are several factors. It would be difficult to generalize simply on the basis of incumbency.
Point taken. Farooq Dhondy, do you believe there's a cultural divide in Britain as well when you see the rise of the Reform Party, Nigel Farage and others? Are they a sign of the more worrying sign of the times? The battle continues in a sense between liberals and conservatives?
See, economic hardship is one thing, but all across Europe and America, immigration has become a huge issue. And I'm sure that in France, for instance, apart from the blunders that Macron has made in trying to raise the pensioners' age and so on, apart from economic hardship, which certainly does shape politics, this thing about immigration is playing into Donald Trump's hands. It's playing into Le Pen's hands, and so on with Hungary, and very many of the states of the European Union are opposed to immigration, and that is giving a rise to the right wing. People say that the Sunak dismissal and Keir Starmer's election is a move to the left, but it's not necessarily so, because Keir Starmer is as friendly towards the same factors, the idea of growth, the idea of supporting business, whatever the business is, and so on. So Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are not really stalwart left-wingers, even though the left wing of the Labour Party will push for certain reforms, which one looks forward to in Britain. And possibly they trust Keir Starmer more on immigration, because Rishi Sunak's policies on immigration, especially the Rwanda one, has absolutely failed. They haven't sent one person to Rwanda, and they've spent millions of pounds to Rwanda and in their propaganda about it.